Hi, Jen.
Hello, how are you though?
I am good. How are you?
I am okay. Okay.
Good, good.
Looking forward to the sun. Looking forward to the summer. I can't
I
lie.
know. I know. I think by the time this comes out, I will be not too long after getting back from Africa. So I will have left the cold and had to come back to it, which is not ideal.
Well, I envy that you're going to be away from it.
I will I will be away from it and I will take full advantage of the fact that I get to be away from it and in one of my favorite places. So I will not complain.
Cool. So today we're gonna jump right in because it's gonna be a little bit longer. It actually might be a two-parter. This might be a two-parter.
I think it'll be a two-parter.
We're gonna be talking about willingness gaps. And you might be wondering, what's that? What is that?
Exactly.
What is a willingness gap?
Exactly. So Jen and I have built our methodology around the concept of the willingness clarity formula and the fact that you need to have both willingness and clarity in order for something to be executed well, in order to set yourself up for growth, for change, and for essentially execution at work. And so if you picture, we're going to put a link in the show notes so that you can get to that matrix that we've built, which is essentially a matrix where one axis is willingness, the other axis is clarity, and understanding what happens in the workplace when these things are not present together. Obviously, we want to be willing and clear, and that's the goal. But the reality is, most of the time, there are willingness gaps, whether it's with a whole team, whether it's with a few people, but these willingness gaps show up. And these willingness gaps show up, and when they show up, they typically act as almost roadblocks to the success of something actually being able to be delivered. And
Yeah.
so we have identified 8 main willingness gaps that can be the barriers to success. And so we thought, let's talk about these gaps. Let's talk about the 8 and see why we've come up with them, how they show up, how they trick us into potentially misbehaving at work and not following through, and what we can do about them.
For sure, for sure. Because what happens when these willingness gaps are there and they're not addressed, that becomes culture,
Yes.
right? And sometimes that culture is,
Yeah, and I think even if it's not toxic, like too often when I go into an organization, I see, we've got the culture on the wall, right? Like we've got what our mission is, what our vision is, what our values are, but I always challenge them to not look at what's written on the wall, but look at what's actually accepted and supported and demonstrated every single day at work. And those typically don't line up.
yeah. Well, so let me be clear when I talk about toxic. When I'm talking about toxic, I'm talking about exactly what you're saying, how the values and everything that we say don't line up with what we do.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's what I consider
Yeah,
to
and
be.
toxic doesn't need to be, I think people hear toxic and we think like green, nasty sludge. And it doesn't need to be that. It doesn't need to be that toxic, right? Like it's just toxic is bad.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So let's talk
Okay, so
about
we
these
start
gaps.
with the first one. I think it's Jen's favorite. So the first willingness
Trust.
gap is trust. So Jen, I say this is your favorite because it's something that you talk about a lot. So why is trust so critical, and why are trust deficits one of the biggest things that can lead to a willingness gap?
Well, if you think about, so let me put it this way. In order to be able to be successful in anything, you've got to have a certain level of trust, whether it's within yourself or with the people around you, to be able to execute and produce whatever it is that you're wanting to produce. If you don't trust, then anxiety goes up, and when anxiety goes up, stress goes up. We don't feel well, we don't do well, we act in ways that may not be becoming, right? And so if there's a lack of trust, then that impacts productivity. If there's a lack of trust, it impacts you physically, mentally, emotionally, right? And so that's why trust is so important at the ground level,
Yeah,
building
exactly.
that up.
So one of the things that I talk about in the Happy Leader method is energy systems, right? And so I always talk about energy systems, and the emotional energy system is impacted by trust. Is trust and safety is essentially the emotional energy system. And the example that I always use is, think of just that bad relationship that we've all had, a bad relationship, whether it's a boss, a friend, a partner, whatever it is, but that bad relationship and the amount of energy that is used when you have to really think about everything you say, because you don't want them to take it the wrong way. You don't want them to misunderstand it. Like, because that trust isn't there, it leads to like a lot of overthinking, and just the energy that is exuded from that level of overthinking. And you transform that into workplace terms, how much wasted time is spent overthinking versus actually doing.
And when that trust is breached, then it takes so long to repair. So another analogy, think of a chair, right? You sit on a chair, you expect the chair to hold you up. You're good. You trust that that's going to happen. The one time it doesn't happen, when you fall, then you're going to spend time afterwards making sure you're just testing out the chair before you sit in it and all of those kinds of things, right? Same thing happens in relationships, right? When the trust is breached, then you've got to spend all this time repairing that, which slows down what you could be doing, what you could be producing, how you could be effective.
I have a totally terrible story in my head right now. I dropped an ex playing the trust game once.
Oh,
Like, legit. Like, it's one of
was
the
it an
funniest
accident though, Mel?
No, I had stopped playing. So, for those who don't know me, my attention span isn't always great. So, I was done. I had stopped playing. He was still playing. I didn't know. And he literally went from standing to flat floor. I just like heard this like massive bang, and I turned and I was like, what are you doing? I break trust. He would never play the game with me again. It's weird. I don't know why.
See,
So
that was an impact of trust.
don't always trust me, not in the trust game. So one of the things that I talk about a lot, like when we think about like how do we actually build trust within a workplace, I often say one of the most important leadership skills is actually consistency.
Yeah.
And I really believe that consistency, and I actually say to people, ironically, even even consistent poor behavior is actually better than inconsistent behavior, because people like to know what to expect. And so, so if you are, again, not ideal, but if you are consistently just mean to everybody, people can actually process that. They know what to expect. They can handle it. They don't take it personally. It's inconsistency that then people don't know how to process it or how to take it and what to trust, what to believe. And that's when it becomes not great. And so that's why, to me, I think consistency is one of the most beneficial leadership qualities that we can have people learn and really work on.
Yeah. That consistency, and let me put it this way, doing the hard thing or doing the unpopular thing, even when everyone else is saying, no, let's not do that. And you're like, no, this is the right thing to do. And being consistent with that type of behavior will allow people, when you do mess up, because we're all going to mess up, we're all going to make a mistake, right?
100%.
And when that person that makes a mistake, because they've been consistent before in their actions, even when nobody's watching them, when they mess up, it's like, oh, well, they're usually this way, so let's give them a pass, or let's find out more, or let's be curious and kind of figure out what's going on here. That's not normal behavior, right? That's what happens when there's trust. When there's a lack of trust now, then that's when relationships blow up and people are angry, and we spend so much time, as you said, that emotional energy is exerted. So yes, trust is important.
Yeah. So with trust, so we're saying consistency, follow through, transparency, that those are some of the big characteristics that can help rebuild trust within a workplace.
For sure. Now, things that can impact trust and that consistency is our second willingness gap, and that is fear.
Yes. So fear is a big one, right? Like when we think about what happens when we're operating from a place of fear, so much happens. And I'm sure Jen can give us some neuroscience on it. I'm going to just give you the Melissa practical zero neuroscience version of it. But when I think about fear, I think about, I think it shows up almost in two different ways. It can either show up as like complete avoidance of risk, right? Like risk avoidance. So not speaking up, not willing to try things, not willing to do things that I might fail at, right? Like sort of that avoidance side of things. But I also think it can show up almost in the other way too, that depending on personalities, fear can show up as over confidence or over presentation sometimes as well. I think it more often shows up as that, as the other
That
way.
fight,
Like,
flight, fawn.
yeah, exactly.
Fight, fight, fawn, right? And
Yeah.
so we're gonna keep going. We're gonna, right? I'm gonna prove. I'm going to avoid, and then there's freezing. Like, I'm not sure what I should, right? So the neuroscience of it, and I'm not going to get detailed, but essentially, when
We
you're in
like it when
fear
you
mode,
do, don't worry.
but when you are in that fear mode, like the amygdala is going off and you're danger, because the
Mm.
brain, again, it doesn't understand the difference between being chased by a bear and getting an email saying, "Can you come see
Saying
me?"
we need
from
to
your boss.
talk.
We need to talk, right? And the same thing the brain just goes off like fear. There's danger. We cannot think rationally when we're in fear mode. Like it's nearly impossible to do. You gotta calm down to be able to address and figure it out.
And I have two things that I think that I want to add to that. One is, and I think I've said this on another episode, but I had a psychologist once say to me that when people are in that state, that it does essentially because they're trying to save themselves, like they're in that state of fear, goal is protect self, that they do act selfishly. So if we transform that into workplace behaviors. But the other side, I may have lost my second thought, Jen. It might come back to me.
Okay.
But because whatever. Yeah, it's gone. It'll come back to me though. So I don't. What do you think about sort of the idea of the selfishness though?
We are made to protect ourselves. Like it's just human instinct to
Hmm.
protect self. It just is. And so sometimes that self-preservation, it's not a bad thing, but if you're noticing that in an employee or in someone you're leading, that they're very much into themselves, then you have to start questioning, okay, what's going on? Like
Yeah.
having that curiosity mindset, like what's going on that's making them feel that they are not able to operate out of fear, like
Yes.
not in fear. Did I
Yeah.
say that right? Yeah.
I think so. My thought came back. And I think one of the things that I know I've seen sometimes, and you're really good at sort of identifying this and calling it out, is sometimes as leaders, we may be doing things where we're not doing anything that's actually creating fear. We may be clear, we may be laying things out, and we may be doing all the right things and still getting the resistance, still getting that unwillingness, and getting really confused over it. And you're so good at pointing out, yes, you're not doing anything, but if that that individual has a fear that might have nothing to do with the workplace, might have nothing to do with the existing relationship, but they're still operating from a point of fear, that's going to show up as a huge roadblock and barrier still. And that can be confusing for leaders when we've gone into workplaces and they're like, but I'm doing everything right. And it's like, from a textbook standpoint, they are.
Yeah. Part of that is the culture that we live in right now, right? Because I don't want to I don't want to dog any generation. However, at the same time, right? My children's generation kind of grew up in the you're great, you're wonderful, you're amazing, you're like, don't tell them the challenges or their failures, or don't focus on that at
Yeah.
all. Just tell them everything is good. What that has resulted in is this expectancy, right? The generation before, which would be my generation, we had to really learn from our failures, our falls, and all those kinds of things. We were told, "Hey, that was dumb," or that, like, maybe
Yeah.
not that,
Yeah.
but we we had to figure
Well,
some stuff out. Things weren't as easy. Things are easier, or in a different. It's different, right?
well,
And when you
and
have
I
those
think,
two generations coming together,
yeah, and regardless of whether or not it's how they were, like, because again, but our older kids are the same age, in the sense that they were the kids who didn't fail at sports because we didn't keep score, and that weird world that we went through, that's changed again now, which is good. But they're also what's been deemed the anxious generation, right? Because of social media, because of the fact that they grew up in this world where they had a smartphone in their hands from the time they were, like they say 2013 is sort of that tipping point, right? And so like my kids were 12 and 13 in 2013, right? So they were right at that age where all of a sudden social media said, here's what perfect looks like. Here's what this looks like. And so there is a different social anxiety in that generation, and there's science and all of the things to prove it. And it's not about finding blame. It's not about any of that. It's just the reality. They're a very anxious generation.
And so that anxiety translate into fears. It's a challenge. And we've talked about this, Mel, like how do you manage someone who is highly anxious? How do you support that?
And we have big conversations about this because, again, when we like, I think this conversation is probably the most two brain conversation that we have, in the sense of Jen very much is like, but this is who they are. How do we help them? How do we support them? What does that look like? And I very much say, there's only so much support you can give, though. Like, it's still a business. There's still work that has to be done. It shouldn't be that a company's job to lose money because this person is too anxious to do the work. And we have really big debates over this on like, what's the right amount of support? What's the wrong support? How much time do you give to this? And we don't have an answer yet, just so everybody knows. We have decided that if we can solve this problem, we might be millionaires. But but it's something that we actively spend time on trying to figure out, is how do workplaces support the significant increase of anxiety, and to what level do they support it where it's right for both parties involved. We don't have an answer. Just so
don't have an answer other than,
one day.
building relationship and the consistency piece again, right? So that when people are operating out of fear, they're trusting their leaders or they're trusting their coworkers to be able to support them and help bring them.
That's it. Like, I think when there's a high level of trust, because if we think about why anxiety and fear breaks down, it almost always does lead back to that trust. Because if I am somebody who is anxious, I don't feel safe being me and talking honestly about my fears and my anxieties. And if I am leading somebody who is anxious, what starts to happen is it's those thoughts around, are they faking it? Is this the way to, like, you start to have those negative thoughts in your head about, is this just like, or it now impacts my fears as a leader, where it's like me now going, well, I'm going to fail because of them. What happens, and what if people look badly on me? Like it, and so it perpetuates more fears. But when trust is there, that honest, transparent dialogue can help temper the fears.
Definitely. And I know HR probably has a number of thoughts on this, because there's rules, right?
Rules.
There's policies, there's
yeah. And I think when we spend time researching this and debating it and all of those things, is we're trying to say, are the rules right? We know they exist. And like, I can list the HR policies from all the companies I've worked for, but it's like, are they serving organizations well right now is the question.
Yeah.
So I think the only thing we didn't, like, we talked a lot about it, and I think people know, but like when we're thinking about fear, like, like it limits decision making. It limits, again, it goes back to performance. It goes back to, I always think about change, right? And people not being willing to change. Well, that usually comes down to fear. As you know, I spend a lot of time with salespeople. Well, salespeople having fears is typically why they're not successful. Like, fear paralyzes the workplace ultimately.
Yeah, it really, really does. It really, really does. And so we've got to support people in building the C word, confidence. building their confidence, celebrating even the smallest of wins, being consistent. That consistency is probably going to be something that is going to be woven through everything that we talk about, because the consistency is important. If you, as a leader, when something goes wrong and you are consistent in how you manage that and how you respond to that, then when something goes wrong, people aren't going to be as fearful to come and say, okay, this is what happened. If you're responding in a healthy way. I mean, if you blow up and the sky is falling type of response, then yeah, people are going to be scared to come and talk to you, right? But if you're consistent in a healthy way, then that opens the door.
Totally.
Opens the door.
Yeah.
What else?
Anything else on fear? Should we go to the next one?
Don't be afraid of fear. Be
Hmm.
curious about the fear.
That's good. Yeah,
Is
that's good.
is what
That's a
I would
good
say.
finish. That's a good
There you go.
finish.
Mic drop.
So so the next one, the third one is identity threat. And this one's a little bit different. This one's a little bit different, but I think it's something that we're seeing a lot right now. And so when we think about identity threat, it's really and we've had a lot of conversation about it in other podcasts too, about the fact that when somebody identifies so strongly with their work or with their job or with their role, it's the threat that comes with that change could bring, that this is who I am. And what happens if I'm not that way? Or like I'm a senior person. I've been doing this for 25 years. Like, and what comes with that. And so that's what we're talking about when we talk about sort of this idea of identity threat.
What I see a lot of is people's identity is threatened, but then when you sit down and talk to them about how they actually identify, they don't know. It's kind of
Mhm.
like this ambiguous fear or something in their mind, but they don't actually understand who they are
Yeah.
or what they represent.
Yeah, and I think you can also see it a lot. I know I see it a lot with top performers, right? So with salespeople who have been extremely successful. So again, thinking about change, thinking about how we're living in a world right now where we're looking at transforming so much with technology, right? Like we're talking about the fact that this is going to be the next revolution. And so we're changing these things with technology. Well, that if I am somebody who has been extremely successful one way, now you're essentially suggesting I be successful a different way. What does that mean? And what starts to show up? And so you start to see a lot of pushback from top performers, from people who've been really successful one way. And and it could be fear, it could be trust, it could be, there's lots of things that are connected to it, but it just shows up differently. And I think leaders respond differently to it, when especially when it's a top performer.
You know where else I see it a lot? In the DEI space.
Okay.
Because what I've seen is that a whole lot of fragility, right?
Yep.
Because people are being asked to think of things in a different way, to do things in a different way. But in asking that or that expectation being there, it's like you're telling them you're wrong or you are doing things wrong, in a way that's hurting people. And so then it's like, but I'm not a racist, I'm not discriminatory, I'm not this, I'm not that, I'm not. And it's like it's not about
Not
that.
that.
It's just
Yep.
about understanding how things are and deciding we want things to be different. So we have to change the way we do things. And the way you did things before and the way you taught people to do things before might just not work anymore. And so we've got to
Yeah.
change. But that
Well, and it,
identity, ooh, that threat
yeah,
bears.
and it almost connects into like the value, right? Like it's how valuable I am to the organization, and whether it's sort of in the EDI space, whether it's in a sales space, whether it's in like a veteran, just somebody who's been there for a long time and it's been done the same way, right? It's like I have a value that I bring because I bring a lot of experience and knowledge and history. And now you're saying that now I'm not valued in the same way. So that's, I think, that slight tweak difference between it being sort of a fear of change versus I've always been looked up to, and
Yeah.
now what if I'm not? And that's just that slight tweak in question, where I know for me, I'm somebody who, if you come at me with something from a perspective where you go, oh, well, maybe it's this and you're wrong, like I get really defensive about it, because I very much value curiosity. And I think for in this case, understanding the difference between a fear and a hesitation versus a loss of value is a critical conversation. Because if you approach somebody and assume it's fear, but it's actually that they feel like they're not going to be valued in the same way, that to me is like, it cuts in a different way when it's a lack of value.
It's connected but different.
And
Yeah.
that's why curiosity is so key in all of these things. And we talk about curiosity sort of being that emotional intelligence superpower, right? Like, it's, if you can be curious, then you're more likely to understand why there's an unwillingness. And understanding unwillingness the right way is key.
With those identity threats, people get defensive, right? And so then that defensiveness is looked at as resistance. And if we can just get to the core of it, take the time to just get to the core of it, then we're able to figure, oh, okay, we need to address this, not necessarily.
Because it is ultimately resistance, but if we think of it truly as force on force is not moving anything, like it's not moving anything further. So when we face those resistances, and what we're trying to say as a whole with this concept of what are these willingness gaps, like force on force isn't moving it forward. So how do we shift the forces so that they're working together?
Yeah. Okay. Number four.
Okay. Number four. Oh, this is a biggie for right now.
Change fatigue.
Change fatigue. People are tired. People are tired. So I think there's a few different ways that we can look at change fatigue. And I think because we see it a lot right now. We are in a time of change. And so I think we look at that and say, how many change initiatives can one organization handle at a time, or in a year, or over a certain time period? So I think part of it is true exhaustion, like just exhaustion. But then I also think it's the approach to change and just recognizing all the other stuff that comes into change, which is identity, identity threat, fear, trust, all of these things. And so change becomes a really big emotional response, which is why in one of the programs that I built, the emotionally intelligent change, that's what it's all about. It's like change leaders are the best emotion managers because it's all about that. But we're in a time right now where I think people are just like, oh my gosh, we're doing it again. There's something more.
People will move with change if they can understand why the change is happening, if they can be part of the change process, right? I know a lot of times we hear of survey fatigue and stuff like that. And part of the reason for that is because people do these surveys and nothing happens, right? If people do these surveys and they see that their ideas being implemented, then they're invested and they want to be part of that change. But people are tired because it's almost like businesses go through the process and then do what they were going to do in the first place. And that's what a lot of employees are feeling.
Yeah, I think there's a few, I would add to that too. Like, I think there's a few different things that happen. I spent a huge chunk of my career in an organization that changed all the time. But what that did was it almost built like change, a huge capacity for change. But a part of that culturally was we didn't get too connected to a change because we knew it might not stick. We operated very much from a point of speed where we tried something and if it didn't work, we just moved on. And so there was a lot of comfort in understanding we didn't necessarily need to commit to it fully. And that created some safety around the change. And what we did was we stuck with the changes that worked. But it built up a different resistance for change in the team members there who stuck around. Like, some people couldn't handle it and they didn't last with the organization, because if you were going to last with the organization, you had to be okay with this we called it flexible and adaptable. You have to be flexible and adaptable to work here. And so I think part of it is recognizing, as a culture within your organization, are you a culture that has done a lot of change, or are you a culture that hasn't? Because that's going to create a bit of a different approach to it. And then I think the other question to ask is, why are we doing the change? What we're seeing now, especially in the time of AI, and I hear this from AI experts all the time, is they'll get these phone calls that say, we need to implement AI. And then when that expert says, well, why? Like, what are you using it for? And they're like, just because we need AI. But they haven't actually identified a solution that AI will solve, like a problem AI is solving for. They're just doing it because they think they have to. And it's like, and so it's sometimes I think people implement change because they feel like they should, even if they haven't figured out what problem they're trying to solve.
Or there's a problem, they rush to make changes without thinking it through. And so we're going to do this, but then they realize, oh, we didn't think that, so we've got to do this. And they're constantly changing. An organization that's been relatively stable And then a crisis occurs, boom, we got to change. Oh, that didn't work. Oh, we got to, and then people go out of their minds because they're like,
Mhm.
I can't follow. It's like whiplash. They're getting
Yeah,
whiplash.
totally, totally.
Yeah.
So I think looking at, so change is a big one. Like change is a big one in terms of like, it's to me when we're thinking about like what do we actually do to help it, it's thinking about, do we need to give more space between the changes? Do we need to give people more time to breathe? Really truly recognizing strategic timing of change, and giving people space to do the change. One of the biggest things that I see in change and where change goes wrong is we don't realize the time difference. So if I've done something the same way for 10 years, I am efficient at it. And now I'm going to do it a different way. I'm going to be slower at it. Whether the long term is that I'm going to be faster at it, it's different. So I always think about it like driving, right? When we first started driving a car, we were 10 and 2, we were focused, we were like, we thought about absolutely everything we did while we drove. Now I could drive for 2 hours and go, did I drive? Like what happened? Because we're not, and that's what happens, right? So in change, people are now back to 10 and 2 and very focused and much more like
And it takes a lot of energy. It
yeah,
takes a lot of energy, mental energy, physical
all
energy. Yeah.
exactly. And people, and what I see go wrong a lot in the workplace is we give the same amount of time to do the new thing. And now people are behind in their work. They're chasing, they're not feeling like they're being successful, which then stems to all the other stuff. And that's why change tends to burn out before it sticks.
With changing that roadmap of
Mm.
what's going to happen, providing that to people, letting people understand the why, bringing people along, all of those things are required for change. So change isn't just something like that. And businesses who think, well, we can just implement this change and in a month we'll be fine. It's like, no, like first of all, the human brain doesn't like change, period. Like it this naturally does not. It likes predictability, it likes to know what's happening. So to go contrary to that and having that resistance is normal. It's very, very normal. Like businesses shouldn't
Mhm.
get upset if people are resisting because that's normal. But if you set yourself up by doing what we were talking about, the roadmap, the why, the explain, all of those things, then it
Yeah,
allows people to at least be able to know what's coming, what's happening, what their part in it is,
yeah,
what's expected of them.
definitely a two-parter, Jen. We got for 4.
That's four.
So we got 4 to go. It's a perfect
We got
two-parter.
four to go.
Look,
Yeah.
we did good. We
Yep.
did good. I'm gonna
I
take the
think we're at
win.
our
I think we're at our time now. Yeah.
yeah.
So I'm gonna take the win and say we did it on purpose. We knew it would take 2 times, and look, we did it.
We said that at the beginning. This is a two-parter.
We did. We said we
Yeah.
thought maybe, but look, we should have just been more confident. We knew we'd talk too much.
Hopefully you got something from it, right?
Yeah.
And again, the link to do the assessment to kind of find out what gaps, what willingness gaps might be going, or are there clarity issues going on? Click the link, do the assessment, and give us a call, email us, let us know how we can help.
Awesome. Okay, we'll be back with part 2.
Bye.
Bye.